Hi guys, for those of you who are new to my channel, my name is Jennifer and this is an exciting video to make. It's my favorite books of 2016. I read 83 books this year. I was going to make a top 10 list, but actually there are 9 books here that stand head and shoulders above the rest. I've ranked them, but really the order is flexible. So let's get cracking. Number 9 is Villette by Charlotte Brontë. This is about a young woman named Lucy Snow who's alone in the world. We know that she's faced tragedy, but we never learn any specifics, and she travels from her home in England to become a teacher in France. Okay, being completely honest, this is one of the most boring books that I read all year, but the more I've thought about it, the more convinced I've become that it's actually a work of genius, and I don't throw that word around. I think it's the first time I've ever used it on my channel. This book is not trying to be interesting. Charlotte Brontë as a writer knows how to hook you, and she purposefully doesn't do it, because what she is trying to do is to mine the depths of a character who doesn't want to be explored. Lucy Snow is the most frustrating narrator. She is such a liar. Like, she never tells you what she really thinks, ever. There are times when she thinks she's being open and confiding. She's not. She's always hiding something. So then you, as a reader, become like a detective. You have to be vigilant to figure out what's really going on inside of her, which makes this boring book strangely thrilling. Number 8 is Bodies of Light by Sarah Moss. Now, I read Night Waking earlier this year. I liked it. Thought it was pretty forgettable though, and nothing about it stood out, and I thought maybe Sarah Moss just isn't a writer that I'm going to gel with. Then I picked this up at the beginning of December and it blew me away. It's about 2 sisters named Ali and May growing up in Victorian Manchester. Their father is an artist, so he appreciates aesthetic beauty and comfort, but their mother is about as severe as they come. She's a very progressive woman, so she believes in educating her daughters as much as possible, but she's demanding and unforgiving. And this book is about how 2 people can grow up in the same exact circumstances and react to them so differently. May loves her parents, but she thinks that her mother is ridiculous sometimes, and she doesn't feel bad about breaking some of her rules. But one disappointed word from her mother can ruin Ali's day. There's just something deep inside of her that craves approval that never comes, no matter how hard she works. This is also about how Ali joins the ranks of Britain's first female doctors, and I found that fascinating, but what really sets it apart is the writing. Moss effortlessly blends Victorian and contemporary writing styles, and she has such a butterfly touch. So she'll go to a scene really quickly, land on it, brush against a description or a feeling, and then flit away again. Her choices are so delicate and brimming with emotion, so I was really impressed and I can't wait to read the sequel to this. Number 7 is the only one I don't have a hard copy of, and I've talked about it a lot on this channel. It's Do Not Say We Have Nothing by Madeleine Thien. This was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize, and in my heart, it won. This is about 2 families that we follow through 20th century China, through political upheaval after political upheaval, and then we follow them after their families immigrate to Canada. It's about the intersection of the personal and the political, and about patterns of repetition in our own lives and in storytelling and in history. What makes an idea or a feeling new, and what makes it borrowed? And if it's borrowed, is it still genuine? Some members of these families are musicians of the Shanghai Conservatory, and the way that Thien writes about classical music just made me want to go listen to like Bach fugues and Beethoven sonatas on repeat. Like, it is captivating. It's a sweeping, epic book, but also intimate, and Thien never sacrifices character development or plot to make a point. 6 is the only YA title on this list, and it's One by Sarah Crossan. This is told in free verse, so it looks like it's normal size, but a lot of the pages look like this, you know, so you could read it in one afternoon and it will be a beautiful afternoon. One is told from the perspective of Grace, who's a Siamese twin, and she and her twin sister Tippy are teenagers, so they're older than people ever expected them to be, and they have some complicated medical problems, but they don't just have physical problems. They're also starting at a new school, and they have some iffy family dynamics. Being joined is normal for them. They've always experienced the world together, and so they wouldn't necessarily categorize it as an issue, except that other people can't let it go. people stare and point and whisper about how horrific it would be to be one of those girls. And Grace is like, the only thing that's horrific about it is how much everyone else sucks. It's about the mind and experiences of this one girl and how she's growing up in unusual circumstances, but she's still just growing up and trying to figure out who she is and who she wants to be. It made my heart swollen with feelings. I mean, there are a lot of light, funny parts, but basically it destroyed me. Number 5 is The Laramie Project by Moisés Kauffman and the Tectonic Theater Project, and it's actually about half this length. Like, this is the original play, and this is the sequel play, which I haven't read. I had heard about this for years, and I just didn't expect it to be this good. It follows true events. So in 1998, a gay University of Wyoming student named Matthew Shepard was lured out of a bar by 2 straight men who claimed that he hit on them. He was taken to a remote area, brutally beaten, and then tied to a fence all night in sub-zero temperatures. He was found the next day by a biker, but he died a few days later from his injuries, and he never gained consciousness. And this caused an uproar in America. Suddenly, the eyes of the nation were on Wyoming, media flooded the area, and Laramie residents found that their town had become a symbol of small-town bigotry. And members of the Tectonic Theater Project in New York went out to Laramie to interview hundreds of townspeople, partially to reconstruct the facts of the case, but mostly to hear people's opinions about what had happened and their reactions to all the attention that the town was getting. This play is mostly edited transcripts of those interviews, and so you get to hear from so many different kinds of people. You hear both from people who are accepting of the gay community and from people who are not. But regardless, in the presentation of all the interviews, there's compassion and intelligence. So this play that could have been a crime thriller or an indictment of small-town ignorance actually becomes a play about giving many different kinds of people a voice and looking at the role of the media and how we consume and process tragedy, and about how people deal with when you come face to face with the hatred and the violence that might be bubbling under your seemingly wonderful community. I think we should chuck plays like Death of a Salesman out of our tired high school curricula and include plays like this that could really make students lifelong readers. Number 4 is The Accidental by Ali Smith. Now, this was the year that I discovered Ali Smith. I read this one first, and then Girl Meets Boy, and then I also read How to Be Both at the beginning of December. I was debating between that one and this one for my best of the year list, but I think I like The Accidental a little more. We get inside the heads of 4 family members who are on vacation, and they are so disconnected from each other that when this random woman shows up in their home, they all assume that one of the other 4 knows her, and they welcome her. It's stream of consciousness, but accessible stream of consciousness, and I wish that we used this in schools before we read The Sound and the Fury, because the way things are now, it's like teaching people how to ski by taking them to the top of Everest and being like, okay, find your way down. None of the narrators is particularly likable, but I loved being in their brains, and Ali Smith has a talent for showing the contemptible sides of people without judgment, and for exposing people's follies without laughing at them. I especially loved being in the little girl's head, and Astrid's final chapter in here is like a display case for what Smith can do. Like, she just takes all these pieces and strands from earlier in the book and earlier in the chapter and brings them all together for these moments that become like intellectual fireworks. Like, bam, that was so good. Like, bam, bam, so good. I had to put this book down at times because I was like, this isn't even fair. I can see how this might not be for everybody, but I think it's brilliant and that it's worth a try. The worst that can happen is that you find that Smith just isn't for you, but you might find yourself surprised, like me, and fall head over heels for her writing. Numbers 3 to 1 are basically interchangeable, and any one of them could have been my favorite book of the year, depending on what day I filmed this video. I have 2 novels left and 1 nonfiction. I guess I'll start with the nonfiction. This is One Child, the story of China's most radical experiment by Fong. Now, when people think about the one-child policy in the West, there are 2 prevailing ideas. 1, some of the human rights violations that have happened because of it are horrific. But 2, you know, China had a population problem, and this was necessary, and it's helped their economy. Fong looks at number 2, and she's like, actually, this wasn't the reason for China's economic growth, and it will be the reason why China's economy goes into a tailspin in the not-too-distant future. She takes you through all aspects of the policy. She looks at the idea behind its creation and the holes in the logic. She looks at how Chinese demographics have changed and how this has transformed Chinese culture. We get both narrow and wide focus in here. So for example, Fong was traveling in China when an earthquake happened, and she tagged along with this family that was going back to their village to find out if their only child had survived, and she hadn't. So Fong tells you the story, and then she pans out and she tells you about what happens to Chinese parents in general whose only children die, and how they become social pariahs, and it's harder for them to find burial plots because they don't have financial or upkeep insurance. So I loved how in-depth this got. I much preferred this to kind of broad survey nonfiction, and it's so short and readable. Definitely recommend it for everybody. Number 2 is My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Fredrik Backman, and this was translated from the Swedish by Henning Koch. This is about a little girl named Elsa who has a wacky, amazing grandmother, and she's close to both of her parents, but her parents are divorced and they're busy with their work, and Elsa is bullied at school, so her grandmother is her lighthouse and her best friend. And then Granny dies, and she leaves apology notes for Elsa to give to other people, and these notes tie together Elsa's real life and the Land of Almost Awake, which is a magical kingdom that her grandmother invented for her. It's about loving someone so much that the grief that you feel about them not being there anymore can never be healed. But that grief allows Elsa to see suffering in other people that she didn't see before, and it makes her aware of the extraordinary strength of people that she thought were ordinary. Elsa's smart as a whip, but she never reads as an annoyingly precocious child protagonist, and the whole book is just like one giant hug. I adored all of these characters. I was tickled by Bachman's tone. I had a constant lump in my throat as I read this. It's magical. If you've watched this channel faithfully, you can probably guess which book I have left. Getting the honorary #1 spot for today is The Portable of Evelyn by Elizabeth McKenzie. I'm a little surprised that this is #1 actually at the end of the year, not because it's not my favorite, but because I think we as readers are trained to think that tragedy is automatically more profound than comedy. I mean, and there are some sad elements in here, but mostly it just made me laugh and think. A few months ago, I sleptwalked over to my journal and wrote down, "The Portable of Evelyn is about the complexity of resentful love." And I woke up the next morning, no memory of having written this, but there it was, and it's true. This is about a woman named Veblen and a man named Paul who become engaged in the first scene of the book, and they have fraught family relationships. They love their families, but there's so much water under the bridge. There's just guilt and anxiety that has built up over years. And you realize as the book goes on that they're really trying not to replicate those relationships with their own. But it's really hard to avoid resentment. One source of conflict between them is Veblen's obsession with squirrels. She can't exactly put her finger on why, but she just loves them. So when a squirrel gets into their home and starts scrabbling around on the walls, she doesn't mind. But Paul can't sleep. He's exhausted at work, and Paul just wants to exterminate this thing. But no, he goes out and buys the humane trap that doesn't work because of Veblen. McKenzie just so brilliantly captures how something that was adorable about your partner can very quickly become not so cute. And McKenzie also looks at forgiveness, about how you forgive other people and how you forgive past versions of yourself. The whole thing is just written with so much wit and heart and verve, and a lot of people focus on the zaniness of The Portable of Evelyn, and I understand why, but I want to stress that it's not weird for the sake of being weird. It never feels forced. It's just unique. I've never read a book that had this tone. It's pitch perfect, and I love it to pieces. That's it. These are my favorite books of the year, and if you drank every time I used a positive adjective, you're drunk. Looking at these is just making me feel like all warm inside. One thing I really like about this list, which was not intentional, is that I think 4 of these are perfect for non-readers. So I wouldn't hesitate to hand any one of these to a person who doesn't read very much. So it's kind of like a little mini reading starter kit. You have YA, play, nonfiction, novel. Do not hand Villette to a non-reader though. Oh my god, that would be a disaster. Let me know what you guys think of these books and what your favorite books of the year are. Bye guys, thanks for watching and have a happy New Year's.